Hello. In the Crown of Aragon, 639 years ago, it was May 21st, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is The Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document is from one of the commune registers from Joan, and these registers are ones that are of the most kind of humdrum, businessy kinds of matters. The commune registers are ones that I think hold documents Joan himself might not have even been aware of. They kind of are the places where people are dealt with when they come to the court with various problems that are just not important enough to merit the attention of the king for any long period. There might be some kind of summary that the chancellor or vice chancellor provides later, like a long list of like, here's what the 20 documents we created today authorized people to do, and that's what gets presented to Joan. Although it's kind of, it's not something you can really like count on for every single document you see in here, because I think on occasion we can find something in the commune register that we can say, oh yeah, Joan was definitely involved in this, or Violante was definitely involved in this. Can we say that for today's document? Probably not. Well, I don't know. Depends who this dude is. All right. So what we're going to look at today is another instance of the king's authority being used to get somebody out of a criminal prosecution. And it's an interesting little case that we have no details about, but it's the tone of this particular document that's quite funny. And all right, let's get into it. The addressee is the Bishop of Elne. Elne is not quite as well known today as Perpignan. At the time of this document, Elne was more of a political center and maybe even a bigger town than Perpignan. I'm not sure. But in these centuries of the late Middle Ages, Perpignan really grew a whole lot. I mean, it's on the coast and Elne is not. And so the economy of Perpignan really fueled a lot of its growth, and eventually the political authority of the region transferred over to Perpignan. Now, at this time, the political authority was still in Elne, and so when we have a document being addressed to the Bishop of Elne, we're really talking about somebody who's got a lot of authority over a large region, the Perpignan region. And so this is an important person. The apparatus of the document is pretty typical, except we've got an unusual probata. So the probata has the name of somebody who I do not really recognize. I mean, it sort of rings a bell. Like, I feel like I've seen a document or two by this person before. It's someone who I think is Jacobus. It's a J-A and then a abbreviation mark that I think is standing in for a kind of C. So it could be Hakme, but I think it's Hakebus, like Jacob, de Podio. And then we have Mandawit, but we don't have the Mihi. And I wonder if he just forgot the Mihi, because we go right from Mandawit Rex. Mandawit to Rex. And then the next line, we've got Facta Pair. And then we have another name, just a JA. So I think that is a Hakme Pilares. And then on the next line, we've got the information about this Hakme Pilares. He is a soldier, a counselor, and a pronotary. It's a pro and then an M, like a promo, some kind of other title. So a knight. So milite is knight, and then a knight, a counselor. So somebody has some kind of role in the king's court that allows him to, I guess, sort of like the vice chancellor would, make a decision about whether to intervene in a criminal case in Elne. So the case itself is about somebody named Guillem Ribes, and that person is from Perpignan, so he's identified in the first line, Guillem Ribes de Perpignan. All right, now, I have to admit that the AI help that I got with this document was extremely helpful. This is not one that went through the automated pipeline that I set up with Agentic AI. It's one that I did not do it's for a register that I didn't put through that process, and instead I went back to my old way, and I was able to make some corrections in the middle of the process, and being able to get in there while these multiple iterations or multiple promptings are going on with the large language models, it really, I think, helps a whole lot in order to get a very useful final product. I will say that I am getting used to the use of the word press, P-R-E-S, to mean imprisoned. For some reason, that just is hard for me to get my head around. Like when I see P-R-E-S, I want to think that it's something like present or some other kind of meaning. But when I put that word into the Diccionario Catalan Valencia Balear, it came up with pretty clearly, like, this word is used to mean someone has been imprisoned. Now, I did that. I put it into the Diccionario because of the response that I got from Gemini and Claude, who both immediately identified this as someone's in prison. So the first line reads Bispe, meaning, "Hi, Bishop. Antes havem que vos tenits pres en Guillem Ribes," which means we have come to understand that you have imprisoned Guillem Ribes. All right. So it's clear in my understanding now, and I've confirmed it with the Diccionario, that this is a word that when I see it, when I see P-R-E-S, it means someone's been imprisoned. Usually that's the meaning that's in these documents. So I have learned something, and I'm going to now be way more attentive to that, because when I first was reading over this on my own, I kind of read over that and it didn't kind of click that we're talking about someone who's imprisoned. All right. So we do not know what they have done. The document does not say what crime Guillem Ribes is accused of, but it says something else, and it's kind of funny. basically in lines 2 and 3 of the document, the message is we the king have found out that this person has been imprisoned not because of committing a crime, but because someone had a grudge against him. And that is, quite the statement there. It's a lot of intrigue being implied. The part about the intrigue is sort of, it's not like, let's see, I think it's the word like instigatio in line 3, de alcuns. Yeah. Now, all right. The word that always sticks out to me is maravilla. That's in line 4. So we have seen this word used when Joan is angry, or when Violante is supremely disappointed. They use this word in a way that I think in English we would today use the word astonished. We are astonished. We are very astonished that this is happening. And so when I see that word, I think, maybe Joan is involved? But I don't know. It just doesn't seem like, because of the probatum. Maybe the mandawit rex does mean Joan was involved. I am thinking that when I see that word, it is an indication that the sovereign has a personal participation in the document, because I wonder about how comfortable the officials would be to use that term. Maybe it's a little bit more of a common usage than I'm understanding at this point, but this is an open question for me, and I'm just going to keep tracking that word. And I think at some point I'm going to see if I can get some results by doing a keyword search from the data, the big data generated from my agentic AI pipeline. Because now that I'm talking it out, I'm like, well, I really want to try to see if I can become sure that this is a word that the scribes would be hesitant, very reluctant to use without having it come from the sovereign himself or herself. So we have that note of emotion or supreme disappointment in the middle of the letter, saying, I am astonished that, and it's maravilla molt, very astonished. And then we go on to hear in the last couple lines of the letter that the bishop is expected to inform the king of what is going to be happening with this case, that this is going to be taken care of, that the person is going to be released. And then, if not, then it would be what's phrased here as a cosa deshonesta, a dishonest thing. And what's interesting is that there's a missing H. Like usually we've seen, when we see that word, it's spelled with an H. But I agree with what the large language models came up with here, which is that this is the word for dishonest. And it's just that the scribe considers the letter H to be optional, which we have seen. I mean, we just talked about that yesterday. And so, yeah, okay, I think this is correctly interpreted as a dishonest thing. And then the next phrase is e a nos desplaent mejoramont. I will be displeased. And then we have a word that's like majorly, if you were to try to get it right into its English cognate, but maybe it would be better to say primarily. And then we have this phrase, Com lo dit Guillem sia nostre domestic segons dit es. Okay, in line 2, Guillem was identified as a domestic nostra, a domestic of ours. And then at the end of this rather short document, we would be disappointed primarily because he's our domestic, as we have already said. So it's rambling. And I have a feeling, you know how I was mentioning earlier that I don't really see a lot of documents from this particular scribe, Jacobus de Podio? Maybe, well, I don't know. I'm kind of, as I'm thinking about that again, maybe I have heard him a bunch, but I'm just thinking like this person is maybe less skilled than the usual scribes because it doesn't seem to like flow very elegantly, this particular letter. It seems a bit of like a clumsy construction to say something like, you know, segons dit es when, you know, right after saying com lodi. I mean, it seems like a weird sort of, oh yeah, and I said this as I said it, and it's been mentioned, without really doing what repetition usually does in these documents. Repetition serves to basically increase the legal power of what is being ordered. So if you repeat it and say it in different ways, then it makes it more difficult for somebody to come in later and argue that the intent of the order was different than what you had originally thought. So that's really the purpose of a lot of the repetition that we see in these documents when the same thing is stated in 3 different ways. But here the repetition, it comes across as clumsy to me. And I know I'm still pretty much a beginner at all this, but basically I'm just raising that as a flag. Like, is this like kind of the reflection of somebody who doesn't have as much experience doing these kinds of documents? Let's talk about the word domestic for a second, because it calls up all kinds of associations in English that I think we need to be careful of not really taking too far. So the word domestic in English, it is associated with household. And yes, this person is being identified as someone related to the king's household, domestic nostra, our domestic. But I think it's not really saying that the person is literally a servant in the house or in the palace. I went to the Diccionario again, and turns out that one of the definitions that is one of the earliest usages of this word identified in the Diccionario is from Joan's father, who wrote a lot and at one point was writing a document that basically laid out all the procedures for various royal and bureaucratic activities. This is one of the reasons why he's known as Pere the Ceremonious. He liked to write up procedures and ceremonies and so on. Anyway, he wrote a piece that's gone down in history as the Ordenaciones, so the procedures, basically, you could say. And in that, he uses this word domestique, and that's where we get a definition in the Diccionario for this basically being more broad than what we might think if we are relying on the English domestic sense. So what it can mean is basically somebody that's in the service. And, you know, we in English, we have the use of the word service to mean that you're a servant. That if someone's in service in your household, it means that maybe they're like a butler or a maid. So there's these words that have a lot of just broad meanings. And domestic is one of them. So when we see the word domestic, I think we have to be pretty careful to think of that as basically the dude has been employed and he might have never set foot in the actual home of the monarch or any of the residences of the monarch. But instead, we see domestic used here basically just to mean that this person is our employee. This is somebody who is in some way, I mean, he's not a bailiff, he's not an alguacil, he doesn't seem to be a high up official. He just seems to be somebody who is in some way, I would say lower level, employed by the state, paid through the royal treasury to do something, I don't know what. Maybe he is working on one of the properties. There is a palace in Perpignan that actually Joan and Violante enjoyed very much. They spent a lot of money on it, and it was full of splendor, and there's a lovely article, it is in French, by Claire Ponsic that talks about all of the amazing luxuries that were in the Perpignan Palace. It's a really fun read, so it's definitely worth learning French to read that article because there's a lot there. They had like a big zoo. Oh my gosh, it was just, yeah, there was a lot going on in that Perpignan Palace. So anyway, maybe he does work there, but we can't be super sure, right? All we know is that he's an employee of the state, and so that's the connection, and that's what domestic, I think, would be properly understood to mean in this document. All right, so basically we have an order from, in the king's name. Can we say it's from the king directly? Maybe the Maravilla Mult is an indication. But basically the Bishop of Elne is supposed to release this person, Guillem Ribes. And is it true that he's only in jail because someone didn't like him? I don't know. I mean, my feeling is that maybe not. Maybe he did do a crime and he's pulling strings to get out of it. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me being cynical. Well, hopefully we'll somehow get an answer to this. I did do a search for Guillem Ribes, and nothing came up in the cursory level searching, so we don't know what this case is about. And maybe there will be another document that we encounter that can help us find out. But so often we are left disappointed, as our motto definitely tries to brace us for, but it just, sometimes you're just like, I want to know. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Companiona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. As I said before, remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, and listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care